Good evening.
Good evening, Rabbi.
Thank you. Okay, we'll get started here. Okay. So I think we're starting now a new topic, laws of Mincha, prayer. So we finished brachot. Right. So it says here, כשיגיע זמן תפילת המנחה, יתפלל ומאוד צריך להיזהר בה. Oh, so he says, right, when the time of Mincha comes, you should pray, and you have to be very careful about that, not to miss the Mincha prayers. So, אמר רבי חלבו, אמר רב הונא, לעולם ייזהר אדם בתפילת מנחה וכולי. Because it says in Gemara that this rabbi said that a person has to be careful with the Mincha prayer. Let's look inside the Tur, the whole quote from the Gemara. Right, so it says, because it says, why do you have to be so careful about that? Because it says in the pasuk, "Vahi be'alot mincha, vayigash Eliyahu be'atam mipnei shetfilat hashachar." So he says, right, that Eliyahu on Har Carmel was answered at the mincha time. So you see from there that it's an important prayer. So he says, the reason is because when it comes to Shachrit, the time of Shachrit is known. When he gets up in the morning, he should pray right away. Before he starts his business. So it's also Arvit, the time is known. When he comes back home, and now he's free from his job. But when it comes to Mincha, right, it's in the middle of the day. So what does that mean? He's still, busy with his job. So he's got to make a special effort, to stop and pray. So therefore you have to be very careful, not to miss it. But if not, mikol asakav, להתפלל אותה, to make sure you pray it and right to leave your job and pray it. ואם עשה כן, שכרו הרבה מאוד. So if he did so, right, he has a great reward. Why is that? Because he took himself out of the job to pray, which is not so easy to do. So that's the reason why the rabbis forbade, to do labors, certain fixed labors at the time of, close to the time of Mincha. תתנן, לא ישב אדם לפני הספר, הספר, פירוש להסתפר. As it says, right, in the Mishnah, that a person should not get a haircut, during the Mincha time, right before also. סמוך למנחה, עד שיתפלל, until he prays מנחה, ולא ייכנס למרחץ, ולא לבוסקי. Also, he shouldn't, take a bath, or, also not going to the busiki, which is the tannery, velo ladin, velo lachol, also not to do din, right, judgment, and also not to eat meal. So Rabbeinu Tam says it's only talking about a big meal, right? For instance, brit milah, benisuin, and right, and marriage, pidyon haben, and the redemption of the firstborn, shel ben el asa, and also like a special type of haircut which takes a long time to do, shehi ke'en tisporet shel kohen gadol, which is like the haircut of the kohen gadol, of the high priest. Shaya mitacher ba arbe, because that would take a long time, so it will be very time consuming. Meanwhile, you could lose your timing there. Ubursiki gadol utchilat din. So he says also the tannery, as we said, and the judgment, all these are forbidden. Even close to mincha gedola, even mincha gedola, which is the earlier time of mincha. So when does that start? The 7th hour. But it says it's just a regular meal that a person eats in his house, which is and also a regular haircut, or bursiki katan, and small bursiki. For instance, to look into his labor, his job, whatever. Gemar din, also finishing the judgment. This you can do before, right, mincha gdola, the mincha time. Also this, a big meal, right, and the haircut, the special haircut. And also beginning of judgment. If they already started before, close to mincha, and mafsikin, they don't have to stop. They can continue. Even if it's already the later time of mincha has come. Which is 9 hours mechza, 9.5 hours from sunrise. As long as you're going to have time to pray, after he finishes his seudah, his meal, and his labor. Okay, so let's see if we can get into Yosef here. So he brings a source here of this halacha, Opeg Kama de Brachot, right? First parak of Brachot, Bav Amud Bet. Persinan בפרק תפילת השחר. It says over there, right, in תפילת השחר, which is also Gemara there, Kaftet Amud Bet, Amar Rabbi Chia bar Abba, right, this rabbi said, Amar Rabbi Yochanan, the name of this rabbi, Mitzvah litpalel im dimdomeh chama, right, so he says, the best time to pray, mincha is dimdu mechama. So what does that mean? As like the sun is setting, it's about to set. So he says, where is the verse that corroborates this? It says in Tehillim, right? In Ein Bet, they're gonna see you with the sun. Dorim, and also with the moon. Right? So, but on the other hand, right, in Israel, they used to curse anybody who does this. So what does that mean? He waits like till the last moment, last few minutes. They would curse the person who does this. Why is that? Because, he may come to forget or, to get busy with something. And because there's not much time, he's going to lose the mitzvah altogether. So Rashi explains, right, what does this mean with the sun, right? That you should pray both with the sun. So what does that mean? Shachrit, you should pray at sunrise when the sun is rising, and B'tfilat Mincha im shiket chama, and also the Mincha you should pray when the sun is going down, just the opposite. This is the best way to do it, On the other hand, in Israel they used to curse person who does this. Why? Because he's waiting till the last moment, for Mincha. Al mishem mashhe tfilat mincha im dimdomei chama. A person who waits so long. Because he may lose track of time. By way of some activity that he's doing, whatever. And the time will pass. So this rabbi says, Pet Gimel, right, in the Rambam, on the Rambam, ועתה נהגו לעולם כרבנן להתפלל עם הערב, או כרב יוסף דאמר בירושלמי, זה לא הוקשה תפילת מנחה לתמיד של מן הרמיים, אלא לקטורת שנאמר, תיקון תפילתי כתורת לפניך, ואמר רבי חייא בר אבא, אמר רבי יוחנן, מצווה להתפלל עם דמדומי חומר, ואף על גב דלאי תעלה במערבה, הנמילה מאן דמאחר תפה. So, but he says that the custom is now to pray, late, like before sunset, as we said, right before, he says. And even though, that they cursed about this in Israel, nevertheless, we're not worried about it. Why? Because that's only applying to somebody who waits like till the last minute. But if you, have a little bit of a leeway there, a little bit of time to catch your breath and pray, right, then it's not a problem. So he says, but if it's like, before sunset, it's fine. So as long as you start before sunset, you're good. On the other hand, right, if you wait too long, and you wait till after sunset, so then it's already not so good. That's what he's trying to say. Okay, great. So what else we got here? But there were some rabbis who would do like that, which is the right before sunset. שנאמר, על זאת יתפלל כל חסיד אליך לעת מצווה, לעת מצויו של יום. ואף אגב תפילת המנחה זמנה משש שעות מקצה. So it says, even though the time of mincha is from 6 hours and a half, right, that's when it starts, עד הערב, until the evening, בכל מקום מאן דמצלב מפלג המנחה קטנה או מטה, עדיף תפה. But a person who prays right after the mincha ketana, right, which is it is mincha ketana. It's like 3 hours before sunset. Okay, so that's the best time to do it. The later time. So I said 3, yeah, but the truth is it's really 2.5. Okay, so anyway, it's all good. כתוב בשיבול הלקט, it says in Shibboleth, this rabbi, כתב רבנו אפרים, this rabbi said, בשם רבנו היי, named this rabbi, הציבור תדחיקה להו שעתה בבית שמשה, יתלהו לצלוי בלחש. So he says, right, that a person, the community has only a short time, and it's already twilight after sunset. So what they do is they pray silent prayer. ועדה לנחות שליח ציבור דלת לשליח ציבור למחת ופקינו 18 בקול רם. And then the shliach tzibur will go right and do the repetition, because the shliach tzibur, the chazan, should not fulfill the obligation of the community, right, and in a loud voice. Because he says the tefillah is really the silent one. And they don't fill the obligation of the amidah, whether it's individual or community, only when they pray silently. So he's trying to say, right, that the silent one is the main one, not the one that they repeat afterwards. But the Tekanayu, the Matzle Kulhu Belachash b'mitzvat tefillat hadar nachit shaliach tzibur ve'omer magen machayeh. So he says, what can they do in order to save a little time here? They do first the silent, and then right, the shliach tzibur will come and do the first two blessings, and then they do kedusha, venu kedusha, Msayim Hayla Kadosh, and then he finishes right Hayla Kadosh. Im en shehut beyom ligmor v'yudchet brachot. They don't have time to finish all the 18 blessings. Okay. So he said that's the custom, when the time is pressed. There's not enough time to do the whole thing. So that's the proper thing to do, he says. Okay, great. So this is Aleph, Bet Yosef. So let's go to Shulchan Aruch. Are women obligated to pray Mincha?
No.
Yeah, you're right. They're not really obligated. But the Ashkenazim, they're more stringent about that. They try to do Mincha also. So there is an opinion like that, Tosfot, who requires women to do Mincha. But the Sfaradim, the custom by them is that we do, the women do Shachrit, or just one prayer per day, and that's enough. Dayenu. Okay, great. So let's go to Shulchan Aruch. Okay. So it says here in Shulchan Aruch, Ima Shad Dechuka, right? If the time, is short, התפללו בלחש ואחר כך יאמר שליח ציבור מגן ומחיה מהם מן הקדושה ומסיים. So he says, what's the remedy for that? They should do the silent Amidah, and then the shliach tzibur will just do the first three blessings, right, with the kedusha. We'll repeat it. Hayla Kadosh, Im shehut beyom ligmor yudchet berachot. Right, so when is that? When you don't have enough time, to finish the all the 18 blessings for the chazan, to repeat it. Okay, so that's one way, and that's what we saw, right, in the name of the Gaon that we just read in the Bet Yosef. Says the Ramah here, V'yesh omrim sheitpalel hashliach tzibur im hakahal b'kol ram. Right, so what they do is, they do the shliach tzibur together with the community in a loud voice, and he says that's a custom by us. So there's different customs, how to do this. What is the current custom, by the way? So there's different things, but before we understand that, we have to understand one thing here, which is that according to the Shulchan Aruch and the Ramah, they held like Rabbeinu Tam, So what does that mean? For them, the night doesn't come until 72 minutes after sunset. So that gave them a lot more time, to do Mincha a little bit later. That's what they had in those days, But in our times, most people today, they don't go that long, They try to do Mincha before sunset, and they give you another 13 and a half minutes after sunset. So if you didn't do it during that time, pretty much your time is over. That's how the custom is today in most places. But there are some places, like in Brooklyn, where the Hasidim live and all that, right? They do like Rabbeinu Tam, like the old custom, So they pray Mincha very late. Sometimes, you go to Borough Park, right? You go to Flatbush there, you can catch a minyan Mincha, like half hour after sunset, 40 minutes, 50 minutes, God knows what. They still have minyanim going on, like the old custom. That's their custom, So that's the way they do it. But in most places, it's not like that. So therefore, what should a person do, Lechatchila, you should try to pray like, the Geonim, which is, until sunset and 13 and a half minutes after. That's all you got pretty much, But, if you're pressed for time, whatever, and, it's a pressing situation, so you can do like the old custom, like Rabbeinu Tam. It's okay, because you definitely have what to rely on. Even though there are some books who say you shouldn't do this today, but the truth is they're talking about places where the custom is not like that. But in places where the custom is like that, like New York, in Brooklyn, whatever, so definitely you have what to rely on. There's no question about it. So, in a pressing situation, you can do like the old custom, like Rabbeinu Tam, which was the prevailing custom in Europe, in many, many places. So, that's okay, so you can do it, but better to do like the current custom, in most places. The proper thing to do is like that, to do before sunset and another 13 and a half minutes. That's all we give you. And after that, try to do like a shorter solution, like we're talking about here. Try to do the short way. So what is the short way, right? Just to reiterate, what are we talking about? If you're an individual, right, and you're at home, so you just do the regular prayer. That's the short way. There's no other way. but we're talking about when you're in the community in the shul. So there, what happens is that the short way is you do the silent one, which takes about 5 minutes, and then the Chazan will do like a short repetition, which is like the first 3 blessings with kedusha, and that's it. So hopefully you can fit it in by then. The whole thing, right? That whole procedure. There's different ways to do it, whatever, but it's all good, Baruch Hashem, that's the way it goes pretty much, for more or less. There are various opinions about this. There's, the opinion of the Gra and the Shulchan Aruch and the Ramah, and there's, then you have also, as we said, right, the Magen Avraham, and there's many, many, many opinions. So there is some leeway, and if you're in a pressing situation, you can be lenient, and do like Rabbeinu Tam, do like the Magen Avraham says, well, it's all good. Okay. Very good. So, right, just before we continue, right, I just want to explain to you to make sure we understand. The earliest time a person can pray mincha is 1/2 hour after midday. These are all halachic hours. Right? So today that would be, like in my area, that would be like 1:30, in the afternoon. That would be the earliest time. And we call it, so you can do it by then, if you have a need to do it early like that. As we said, but it's preferred to do it later if you don't really have a need for that. which is 2.5 hours before sunset. That's the more preferred time. And right, the best time is, right before sunset, like most places nowadays, what they do is they start Mincha like 20 minutes out before sunset. So this way they can finish the whole thing, from top to bottom. At sunset, they're all done, like with everything. And even if they go a little bit, few minutes after, no big deal, right? Because you still have another 13 and a half minutes. So you're all good. That's the best way to do it. Okay, great. So hopefully we got that clear. Let's move on. Let's go to bed. So, as we said, right, in the tour, that because we're worried, that a person is going to miss the proper time, we tell him, don't go to get a haircut. Don't go to get a haircut before the mincha time. So what does that mean before the mincha time? 1/2 hour before, don't do that. So it says regarding this, the Bet Yosef, Mishnah Perek Kama de Shabbat. It says, right, there's a Mishnah in first Perek of Shabbat. Which is the Gemara Shabbat, Tet Amud Bet. Lo yoshev adam b'fnei asafar samuch lemincha. As it says, right, the person shouldn't sit to get a haircut, close to the mincha time, ad sheyitpalel, until he prays. V'lo yikanes lemerchatz v'lo lebursiki. Also, right, don't go into the bathhouse. V'lo lechol, not to eat seudah. V'lo ladin, and also don't do judgment. Ve'im itchilu and mafsikim. And if they started, they don't have to stop, So in other words, if they by mistake started, or just they were negligent, whatever, they don't have to stop. They could continue and finish. But Gemara Sham samuch lemincha. So Gemara asked over there, what does it mean close to mincha, right? If you're going to tell me we're talking about the earlier time, right, which is, as we said, 1/2 hour after midday. Amaylo, why shouldn't you do it? Right? You got plenty of time. What's the problem? You still have a lot of time. Rather, it must be we're talking about the later time, right? Which we call mincha ktana, as we said, 2.5 hours before sunset. Im yitchilu and mafsikin. So if they started at that time to do that activity, we don't stop. So that seems to be a refutation of Rabbi Yoshua ben Levi. The Amar Rabbi Yoshua ben Levi, kivan shegia zman tfilat mincha. Since the time of mincha time comes, says this Rabbi Yoshua ben Levi, asur le'adam shit'om klum. You shouldn't eat anything. Kodem shitpalel, before he eats, before he prays. Tfilat mincha, before prays mincha. Lo le'olam. No, Gemara says no, not really. That's not really. It's not a refutation of that. Le'olam samuch lemincha gdola. Really talking about the earlier time. B'tisporet ben elasha. It's talking about that fancy, haircut that the Kohen Gadol used to get. It's talking about that. Not a regular haircut. Below lemerchatz and akula milta de merchatz. Also, right, when we're talking about bath, we're not talking about every type. And also it says, so when we talk about bathhouse, we're not talking about the whole procedure. And also when we're talking about judgment, right, we're talking about beginning of judgment, which takes a long time. So this rabbi comes and qualifies and says, no, we're talking about really our regular the haircut. Why shouldn't he sit lechatchila and get a haircut before that? We're afraid, right, that his scissors are going to break, Oh, poor guy. Wow. Right? If they break, so if they break, the problem is, he's going to have to get some new scissors and it's going to take a long time. He's going to have to order it on Amazon, you know what I mean? It's going to take some time to get get those scissors, whatever. So he says, Shema Yishaber Azug, Velo Lemerchatz, Leazia Be'alma Lechatchila. Right, so he says when it talks about bathhouse, talking about just going in to do a sauna there, right? Why shouldn't you do that? Because we're afraid he may faint, in the sauna there, from all that steam. Whew. Right? So so also, right, so there's also, he says, don't go into your books, your business books, and because you may come to get heavy duty into it, right? Because you don't want to lose money and all that stuff, right? So you get a little bit worried, you get a little bit too involved with it, right? So you may come out really, really late. But also, when we say eating, we're talking about just a regular small meal. Why shouldn't you do it? Because you may come to prolong, the seudah, right? Go long. Have another course, maybe, order another course there. Right? Also, we're talking about judgment. We're talking about the end of judgment. Why shouldn't you do it? Maybe he's gonna find some new claim, right, to overturn the judgment. So it's gonna take a while, to get into all that, right, deliberation and all that stuff. כתבו התוספות. So it says תוספות על לישנא קמא. Regarding the first language of the Gemara, so he says that's the halacha seems to be. So therefore he says, right, you're allowed to have a small meal in Mincha Gdola, the earlier time, Azman Tfilat Dafka, until the time of the prayer. But Dafka Seudah Gdola, that's only a big meal, it's going to be forbidden. For instance, having an engagement party, or a wedding party, right? Chuppah, the Seudat Milah, and Milah, Brit Milah. The law that we don't do. The law Kirabacha Bar Yaakov. It says that we don't pass like this rabbi who goes the later time. The Asar afilu Seudat Kanal Samuch LaMincha Gdola D'Ilcha Kilishna Kama. He forbids even the later time. So he says, but we don't pass like that. We pass like the first version of it, which is the earlier version. So he says because that's the prevailing opinion there, the Talmud. But Rav Asher Shehu Batra Sider at the Talmud. So he says Rav Asher, who was the final rabbi there, he's the one who arranged the Talmud. So therefore the halacha is like him. Right? Legabe the Rabbi Alcha Bar Yaakov, regarding against this rabbi, he's more authoritative than this rabbi. Okay, great. So says the Rosh, right? According to this opinion, according to Tosfot, Rabbeinu Tam, Hilkach Mutar. So that will be permitted to have a small meal, during the earlier time. And if they started with a big meal, we don't have to stop. Even when the later time comes. And As long as he has time to pray afterwards. After he finishes this seuda, and if he started to eat close to mincha ktana, yafsik, then he's got to stop a later time. If he started that time, when time mincha comes. So the Rosh is telling you, right? If you want to go like this opinion, this is the way it comes out. This the arrangement. Okay, great. Oh. So this seems to be a long bit. Yosef goes all the way till the end of the chapter. But let's see what we can do. I'm not sure if we'll finish everything today, but we'll do the best we can. Okay. It says in Hagot Maimon, פרק ו', אף אגב, זה בשבת ויום טוב אוכלים שחרית, אין זה קרוי סעודת גדולה. Oh, so he says, what about Shabbat? Right? So on Shabbat, we tend to eat like, the main meal earlier, right? We don't wait till dinner time. We're talking about Shabbat day, right? That's Friday night. So there, what happens is that we eat earlier, like in the morning. And so that's not called a big meal, though, Why is that? So there's no problem with that. That's what he's trying to say, right? Why is that? Because after all, we're eating in the morning. It's not afternoon yet. So he says a big meal is only when you have like a group of people, eating together. Like some kind of a banquet going on there. For instance, like a wedding, or brit milah. And that's what the Kolbo says. So he says we have to investigate, right, the issue of when you have, a person who has like a big family, right? So it's already like a big banquet by them because they get a big family going on. The whole Siman Yud Aleph, and that's what it says in Samak. כתב הר"ן שהרזה מקל יותר מאומר. So he's more lenient, the Raza, and he says that it says if it wasn't for this rabbi, we would have said, right, the Mishnah is qualifying the Mishnah that talking about the Mincha Ktana, even the later time with Rabbi Yoshua ben Levi idchia la beduchte. So this rabbi will be pushed out, right, from being the halacha. So he says, therefore we learn the Mishnah like the simple interpretation. So we're talking about the later time, right? Not the earlier time. Then we don't even begin a smaller seudah, right? Even at that time. If they start, they don't have to stop. But when it comes to the earlier time, even a big meal is allowed. So what do you see from here, right? That there's a different opinion. This one is totally like the diametric opposite of what we saw in the Tosfot, So we have to see what the halacha is, right, regarding this. It does have a big difference. Okay, go. So what else we got here? But he says, according to Rabbeinu Tam, on the other hand, right, even a small meal is forbidden during the later time, close to the later time. That's what Tosfot says, right? He learned from Tosfot this. So, right, but a small meal at the earlier time is allowed. Azman tfilat mashma. So until the time of the prayer, mashma de mizman tfilat ve'elach. So that implies דהיינו מזמן מנחה קטנה, that implies that from the time of Mincha and onwards, even if it's the later time, you're not even allowed to have a small meal. וסובר דלאו דווקא בזמן תפילת הסמוך לה. So he says that he holds that we're not precisely talking about the time of the prayer, which is like close to it. Nami asur, even close to it is forbidden. Not only the time of the prayer, even close to it. So we already said, right? What does close to it mean? It means half hour before. That's also forbidden. The din seudah ktana lemincha ktana. So he says because when it comes to a small meal, right, in the later time, din seudah gdola mincha gdola. Same applies to the later time, the earlier time. I'm sorry, with a big meal. V'chein katav samak. That's what it says in samak. Shehu dat Rabbeinu Baruch. Rabbeinu Baruch also holds this way. So we see, right, that we got here going on here 3 opinions, right, at least, if not more. So we'll have to see what the halacha is about this, right? But the Rosh says, we already mentioned the Rosh. לדעת רבנו תם, point רבנו תם, the סעודת קטנה סמוך למנחה גדולה יום ביותר מותר. So he holds that Rabbeinu Tam holds that having a small meal, right, during the earlier time, it's allowed. You're even allowed to start it. And also, close to the later time, because he says we're not really concerned about prolonging a small meal. Not a big deal. Right? So what's a small meal? What does that mean? It means that you're just having a meal in your house. Like regular. You drop in. You went to some fast food restaurant. You're in and out. In a half hour, right? So it's no big deal. What's the big deal? How long does it take you to eat at home? Half hour, right? Whatever it is, it's not going to be a big deal. What are you going to do? Sit for 3 hours? By yourself? That doesn't seem right to do that, right? Doesn't seem very likely. Okay. Rabbeinu Katav Svara Zo, so he says the Rabbeinu, the two wrote this opinion, B'Shem Arav Yehuda, according to the name of this rabbi. Shama Misham Ri, that right, said the name of the Ri, B'Chen Katuv B'Samak. It's also said in the Samak like this, Siman Yud Aleph. So we see, right, that as we said, we got plenty of opinions here. Okay, how much Katav Dein Alach Rabbi Yoshua ben Levi, and that which he says. הלך חזר לגבי יהושע בן לוי, דאמר כיוון שהגיע זמן המנחה, once he started the mincha time, אסור לטעום עד שיתפלל, right? You're not allowed to taste anything, until you pray. We don't paskin like that. מסקנת הגמרא בפרק תפילת השחר. So the conclusion of the Talmud, right, in that Gemara there, in the Kaf Chet Amud Bet, the Katav Rashba Sham. So Rashba says there, so that's talking about stopping, like interrupting. That means if he started, he doesn't have to stop. But lechatchila asur, right? He says lechatchila is forbidden. Kedeita the perek kama de Shabbat, like it says in the first perek of Shabbat. Okay, great. Right? So he explains in the Tshuva, the Rashba, his intention was not that he should forbid like tasting anything. Rather, he's talking about a small meal, But just tasting something is okay. So what does that mean? You're allowed to have a snack. We're not talking about that, right? Having a snack is okay. So he says, which we said right close to Mincha, says the Ran, as we said right half hour before. Right, I said this on my own memory, but now we see that it's written here also. Zman Mincha, Rashbam also explains like that. So in other words, usually in halacha, when we say close to something, right, it usually means a half hour. That's usually the definition. וכן פירש רשב"א פירש פרק א' פסחים, וזמן מנחה גדולה משש שעות ומחצה. So as we said, right, the earlier time in Mincha is 6.5 hours. 1/2 hour after midday. ולמעלה, וסמוך לה דהיינו חצי שעה. So what would be close to that? Close to that would be a half hour before, which is like at midday. So at that time already, you know, according to this, it would be forbidden, right, to have a big meal, whatever it is. Okay, great. So he says, right, what about the later time? So as we said, right, it's 9.5 hours, 2.5 hours before sunset. That's the later time. It's called Mincha Ketana. Right, so what will be close to that? That will be a half hour before, right? Which will be 3 hours before. Okay. That's what the Tur says as well. What about the Rif? What does he say? So he says even like having a small meal, right? Close to the earlier time, asur is forbidden. He passes like this rabbi in the Talmud, Mishum delishna, because the language batrahu is the final language there. Right, he's the conclusion there. וכתב הראש שכך נראה לרבנו יונה. So the Rosh says Rabbeinu Yonah also holds like that. It seems like it's all like that, the Rif. But Tur, Choshen Mishpat, what about Tur? In Choshen Mishpat, Siman, hey, כתב רבנו שמסקנת הראש כרב אלפס. So over there he writes a Tur that the conclusion of the Rosh is also like the Rif. Oh, okay. So what does that mean? He doesn't really go like the Tosfot, according to this. But he says, I'm going to write over there, right? Says the Bet Yosef that it's not really so clear that he paskins like that. Rambam also seems to go like that. And this rabbi says, the Ram also was going like this, which is the Tashbetz. So what's halacha, right? Bottom line, right? Where have we come to with all this? So it says, so it says, since the Rif and the Rambam agree to this opinion, that's how we go. So let's just get that straight, right? What are we saying over here? Oh boy. So that seems to mean we're going to be really stringent, right? So what does that mean? Don't have lunch. Right, we're talking about if you're eating bread, you know, because if you're not eating bread, it's okay. But if you're having bread, you're having lunch. So don't have lunch before you pray mincha. Even if it's like a regular lunch, you know, like personal, you know, just you and yourself, or you and your girlfriend, right? Somebody, your friend, you know, that's it, right? So even that's not allowed. Your coworker, right? Whatever, right? Okay, great. So, all right, we'll see in Shulchan Aruch what he says. Okay, let's see what else we got here. Okay, so I think actually we may be able to finish this today. I wasn't sure, but it seems like we're doing pretty good. Okay, so so if they already started though, you know, b'diavad, right? During the earlier time, the Mishnah. So where is this? It's in the Mishnah. That we wrote close by. So if they already started, they don't have to stop. So all these rabbis said, Mordechai also, so they said you learn from the Gemara there, right, like this. Even if they started like, you know, in a forbidden manner, right? In other words, they did it on purpose, whatever. We don't have to stop. Once you start, you don't have to stop. So once you went to the barber, you know, and he already started to do your haircut, you don't have to stop anymore. Just finish it off. We're not so worried about it like that. Right, so that's only if you have time to pray, though, right? There's still time to pray. But if there's no time to pray, right, you only have a limited amount of time, so then you got to stop and pray, right? Tell the barber, excuse me, barber, Mr. Barber, I'm sorry, but I have to pray now. So we're gonna have to take a break, take some other customer, right? In the meanwhile, and then but we'll continue afterwards. Okay, whatever, right? Something like that. So fine. So it says, Ken Katvu Shama Farshim. That's how the commentaries wrote there, right? When he's Karim that we mentioned, Deata Mashma Hachi. That's the way it's implied in the Talmud. Upek Lulav Gazul Moke Behedya Matnitin Bedika Shehut. Right? But in the other Gemara, which is in Sukkah, it says explicitly like that we're talking about when there's time to pray, Otherwise, you got to stop. If there's no time, you got to stop. Mashma B'divrei Rambam. Right, that's what it says in the Rambam. Katuv betumat adeshen. Says in Tumat adeshen, ala ochlim, beseudat nesuin. What about if you're having like a wedding, right? Wedding ceremony, having a meal there, a banquet. Ve'asha overet, and the time, is passing by for mincha time. Tfilat mincha. Sheesh min hagdolim shesovrim she'en omdin leitpalel. There are some rabbis who say you don't have to pray, stop and pray. Mishum dechash ve'lehu askinan b'mitzvah, putrin mitzvah. Why? Because they consider like you're doing a mitzvah, so you're exempt from the other mitzvah. Then mamash, that's the end of it. Then mamash bisfar hazor, but the Beit Yosef doesn't agree with this. He says it's not correct. Katuv be'ol moed, says in this book, bechol advarim she'asur le'atchil kodem le'shitpalel. So it says all the things that they forbade to do before you pray. Im itchili eno mafsik. If he started though, right, but the avad, he doesn't have to stop. Call as long as it seems to him, as long as he has time to pray. When we're talking about other prayers, but when it comes to Arvit though, right, they were stringent. Why is that? Because people tend to drink at night, some wine and alcohol, beverages, right? So what's going to be is if he started these things, once the time of Arvit has started, you have to stop. You have to stop. Why? Because we're afraid that he's going to get drunk, right? He's going to fall asleep, and that's it, right? We're done. He'll lose the mitzvah. It's better. So it says, "V'siman reish lamed hey." It says in this chapter, 235. We're going to see that Rashba doesn't hold like that. That's very interesting. Wow. Okay, great. So we're done with this chapter in the Bet Yosef. Oh no, there's a little bit more. I'm sorry. There's a little bit more. Right, so he says, when do we consider it to be like the beginning of the haircut? Like you start the haircut. Ad sofa siman. Right, so what does the Torah say regarding that? Let's see what he says. Right, so he says, Mishianiach sudar shel saparim. Right, once he puts that, handkerchief on you, to do your haircut, it's considered to be like you started already. You don't have to stop anymore. Right, that apron, right? The apron, that's better. Handkerchief is no good. Apron. He puts the apron on you. Once you get that apron on, that's it. You started. You don't have to stop anymore. Even though he didn't actually cut your hair yet. What about the bath, right? Once you take off your clothing, your upper clothing, then what about the bursiki, right? Which is the once you put, he says, once you put the between your shoulders, this clothing, whatever. They had this custom in those days. Just like people do when they start their labor. What about judgment? Once the dayanim have adorned themselves, with the talit, to wear the talit. ואם היו עסוקים בה ושהתחילו בעלי דינים, but it's as if they already started, once they started, the litigants started on to make claims, right? To claim already. That's already like the beginning. What about eating? Once you washed your hands to eat, right? It's considered like you started already. Or mishatir azaro, or somebody, right, who was opening his right belt. They used to do that in the old days. When they used to start to eat a meal, they would open their belt. So that this way they would have, breathing room, to eat. Right? It wouldn't be tight on them, when they're eating. It's not comfortable. For a person who, tends to open it when the time of the eating. Okay, that's the end of it. So we'll finish a bit, Yosef. Let's see what we got here. Might as well finish this. It's like 2 minutes because we're done. Right? So it says, right, a person shouldn't take a haircut, next to the mincha time, until he prays first. Same thing with the bathhouse. Right? Same thing with the tannery. And also not judgment. And not to eat also. Right? Your meal. Even a small meal. Even if it's the earlier time, right? Which is half hour after midday. Right? So we paskin like from the Rambam. But if you already started them, right? He doesn't have to stop. Even though he started Be'isur, right, in a forbidden manner. But that's only if he has time, to pray right afterwards. After he finishes his activity. But if it's not enough time, he's got to stop right away and do it right away, right? Because otherwise he's going to lose it altogether. So when is it considered like you start your haircut? When he puts that, right, that we said, right, that hoodie, that handkerchief, whatever it is, right? Once he puts that thing on, to cut your hair, that's it. You started. And right? What about the bath? Once he takes off his upper clothing, right? And what about the tannery? When he ties the this garment, right, between his shoulders. We don't do this today, it's not really common. Right? What about the judgment? If they already started, so once the litigants started to claim already, that's it, right? It started. If they were not starting yet, once the right judges, adorned themselves, right, with the talit, right, with the shawl. But he says for us, when is that considered to be? When they sit down, to judge. Once they sit down to judge, that's it, right? That's the beginning already. What about eating? Once you wash your hands, that's it, right? Consider like you started already, even though you didn't take a bite yet. Right? It says Ramah, right? So he says there are those who are more lenient that they say, right, if you're having a small meal, it's allowed, as we saw in the Rosh. Only a big meal is not allowed, right? Like a wedding or a milah. Okay, great. So what else we got here? So some say even a big, big meal is allowed, even if it's the earlier time. Some say, right, a small meal, right, during the later time is allowed. So the Ramah says, right, the custom is to be lenient, like these opinions. Always the lenient side. So what does that mean? Only having a big meal during the earlier time, right? And also, right, the small meal during the later time. So it says could be the reason is why we're lenient is because now they call people out, to come to the shul, so we're not afraid they're going to miss it. Okay, great. Meal בסעודה גדולה, but when it comes to a big meal, יש להחמיר אפילו בסמוך למנחה גדולה. It should be stringent even with the earlier time. אפילו אם התחיל קודם לכן. Even if he started beforehand. כשמגיע מנחה קטנה, so he says, once the earlier time has come, בשעת עוברת, and the time is passing, צריך לקום ולהתפלל. You got to get out and pray, he says. So the Ramah is a little bit more lenient here, right? But we Sfaradim, it seems like we're stringent. So what does that mean? We shouldn't even have a small meal, right, during the earlier time before praying Mincha. This can have, by the way, some variations. But I'm not going to get into it now. It's a little bit late. So anyway, next time, Be'ezrat Hashem, we'll discuss more about these things, and we'll get into it more. So thanks for coming. Be blessed with wealth and health and happiness. Laila Tov, Chazak u'Baruch, and we'll see you, Be'ezrat Hashem, tomorrow.
Thank you so much, Rabbi.
God bless.